Episode 8 of Trash Talk engaged a number of informal sector players in the environmental sanitation at the implementation level. Discussions focused on their work, challenges, and how they can improve their impact. We have seen a number of organizations locally and internationally focused on supporting the informal sector in various aspects of the economy. Today, we have some of these institutions present in studio to speak about how they have played a role in the transformation of the informal environmental sanitation sector in Ghana. After the break, we will meet our panelists. You're welcome back to Trash Talk. Today we are talking about the informal sector again. It seems to be a passion of Trash Talk. Informal sector in the environmental sanitation space, but we are going to talk about the institutions that are behind them, supporting them through both financial and technical. I want to introduce my panel. The first here is Mr. David Mensah Ablorh of GIZ. You're welcome.
Thank you.
And then I'll talk to Mrs. Henrietta Osei Tutu of the GARID project. Madam, you're welcome.
Thank you.
What do you do on the GARID project?
I'm the solid waste management specialist on the project.
Okay, could you tell us a bit about the GARID project?
Okay, so the GARID project is a Government of Ghana initiative through the International Development Association of the World Bank credit, and it's a $200 million project. There are five components, actually. Component 1 is improving drainage and stormwater management. And component 2, which is where I work, is on solid waste management. Component 3 is community upgrading for some flood-prone communities. And then component 4 is on project management. And then the last component is on emergency response.
Okay, and the project is for how long?
The project is for 5 years. We've already done 2 years. We are almost left with 3 years. Yeah.
Yes. David, Mr. Ablorh.
Yeah.
What's your preference, Mr. Ablorh or David?
Any works fine.
Right. David, tell us about GIZ and what GIZ does in Ghana.
Okay, so the GIZ is more like the development arm by the government of Germany, basically here to represent the interest of the German government in Ghana, primarily supporting as many projects. We currently have over 37 projects ongoing in several sectors.
Okay.
And I happen to work in one of those projects, which is the Special Initiative on Training and Job Creation. Similarly to like what she said, we also have 3 components. The first component, which I am a part of the team, is the Business and Invest component, basically trying to bring in foreign direct investment into the country in a bid to expand the economy and create jobs. The second component focuses on MSMEs in Ghana, Ghanaian MSMEs, basically trying to empower them also to be able to do more than they currently do, also with a focus of creating jobs. Now, the third component, which we call the cluster focus, basically focuses on sectoral issues that bother on major sectors. So they work with the GIPC, they work with Ghana Free Zones Board, trying to direct policy, inform policy, and largely just ensure that the frameworks in the sectors are set right to induce development in those sectors.
I know that the German government is quite passionate about employment creation for Africa.
Yes, definitely.
I want to understand your role in the informal sector in Ghana, and since when has it been a passion of the GIZ?
So I would speak specifically for my project, which is the Special Initiative on Training and Job Creation. Started in 2019, and as of now, we have a clear understanding that it's a project that is running till 2025 with a potential for it to be extended. I am a technical advisor specifically responsible for circular economy and agribusiness. So this is actually something that I really do day to day.
Okay.
When it comes to the area of environment, what we are trying to basically do is try and support as many actors in the space as we can to, one, improve the sanitation situation in the country. One thing that we all cannot shy away from is the fact that waste is a permanent thing that we are having to go deal with constantly. It's never going to go away. So we are trying to move away from actually seeing it as waste and beginning to see it as something that is valuable, what is now termed materials in transit. Basically to also change the perception around waste. Once we begin to value it, then it becomes something that people actually look forward to. As it is now, it is not something that a lot of people are excited to even speak about. But we are trying to change the narrative. One of the ways we are trying to do that is to deal with the people at the base of the chain, which are the main people that actually collect the waste informally, be it plastic waste collection, be it those riding the 3 cycles around collecting waste. We are trying to find a way to make sure that they just not see this as something they do to while away time, but something that they see as business. As we cherish what you do, we want them to begin to see it like that and work towards it like that.
The specific details of your interventions in the informal sector, in Ghana. I will want to talk to Henrietta. To you, what does the informal sector represent in Ghana?
The informal sector represents the thriving engine of solid waste collection, specifically in Accra, in Greater Accra.
Why
or
the
bigger
emphasis on
Accra.
Greater Accra, though?
Because in terms of numbers, they are more prominent in Greater Accra than they are in other regions.
Could it also be the fact that when there's a disaster related to the environment, Accra is hardest hit?
Maybe so, maybe not. Okay. But before we started our work, what we did was to assess the situation of solid waste management in Accra, in the GARID area. In GARID, we have 17 metropolitan and municipal areas lying within the Odor catchment. So we did the assessment, and we realized that 70% of the waste is collected and disposed of in designated sites. But of this percentage collected, the informal sector is collecting 49% of the waste.
Almost half.
Or more than half, compared to what we have ascribed as formal service providers. And so we realized that this is a formidable force. They are bridging a very essential gap, and we cannot do any
What do you think has enabled
them.
this force to erupt in the environmental sanitation space?
One, I think in Accra, we have a huge proportion of transient population. So this population does not necessarily live in Accra, but they do business in Accra on a daily basis. So they don't have habitations where they can have legal residence or property addresses to subscribe to a formal service provider.
Are you hinting at the slum development?
Not only slums, low-income areas. We have a lot of issues with our land tenure system. So not just slums, low-income, even some middle-income communities, and also the floating population that comes in and out of Accra. They generate waste, and the waste has to be collected. And so I think that is what has given the formal service providers the force and then the power to be able to do this work that they're doing.
If you could cite, GIZ, I'll come to you, but I want you to cite specific interventions that you have designed for the informal sector players.
So the first and foremost thing we did was to do a mapping assessment to find out what is the situation like. How many people are we looking at? So we have a database of all those working in our GARID areas.
Could you give us an idea of?
We have close to 3,500 workers, informal workers. Some are informal collectors, and some are informal recyclers. Some are intermediate buyers, and some are also processors. They process the waste into valuable resources or other products. And so for those who are just involved in waste collection, we have close to 2,409 in the Greater Accra area. But these numbers keep changing as people move in and out. So we have about 2,005, and after the mapping exercise, we also went further down to talk with them and find out what their challenges are, what their needs are, how they have been servicing their customers and what kind of customer niche they have. So we have a complete information or assessment report on their operations in the area. And we also have a training needs assessment report on them as well. And
what are some of the needs you've discovered are most critical to their existence in the operations?
The most critical one has been occupational health and safety. Especially, I think, around the time we were doing the assessment, 2019, 2020, there was COVID-19. And so things related to health risk for waste workers was a top priority. So occupational health and safety came up tops. We also have things related to business development and financial management, also as part of their needs. And we actually went further to do a training on occupational health and safety for them because that was really critical at the time that we were doing the assessment.
Eventually we'll get to the point of the psyche of people in the informal sector. When I say the psyche, I think with the formal sector, there is a certain structured way of doing things. That's where the business development part will come in. But GIZ, in the last year, what have you identified as key characteristics of the informal sector players in the environmental sanitation space?
I would say it is not too different from what she has mentioned. And prior to one of our very key projects in this space.
Which is what?
Which is the Plastics for Jobs project.
Wonderful.
Which basically was looking at how we could create jobs in the plastic value chain. So we had a roundtable discussion with as many actors in the space as possible just to harness what the key challenges were for them. And these things she mentioned was virtually just about the same thing. And so when we started the project, when we kicked off the project, one of the key things we did with that project was to, one, focus on the waste pickers in the communities. And the challenges we realized, occupational health and safety was very key. Accounting or financial literacy was another thing that they had a challenge with, and basic business management. And so to address these issues, we did several trainings for them. We did a training of trainers virtually just to make sure that within themselves, they have people who can still carry on the training without even GIZ coming in there again. And through that, we were able to train over 600 of them in basic bookkeeping skills, basic negotiation skills, basic business management leadership skills, and we provided PPEs for over 600 of them, just trying to ensure that they find themselves at a place where it becomes comfortable for them to do the things they do, which is very beneficial to the space, and also make sure that they do it without the constant fear of what could happen when it comes to safety when they're undertaking what they do.
Health is very important to me. A little research that was conducted around the COVID-19 and 2021 era pointed to the fact that those in the informal sector really didn't care for the PPEs that you are talking about. What have you done about that? Because that's where I'm going to with the mindset. Because frankly, some organizations I know provided the PPEs and they don't care. They don't want to wear them. Some want to ride around tricycles bare-chested and all of that. What have you done, what have your institutions done to change the mindset of the the informal sector players?
I think that oftentimes what we as technocrats fail to do is we provide things in vacuum. And so we think that PPEs are important and we just provide them. There's somebody doing procurement, he writes a specification and he procures the PPEs. But what we did differently was these specifications came from the informal workers themselves. So we have gloves, we have different types of gloves, and normally organizations will give them the polyethylene gloves, the latex gloves. Yeah. Those are so uncomfortable to work with. They are working in very, very, very harsh, sunny, rainy conditions, and so they want things that are easy to work with, to maneuver their motors and their tricycles. And those gloves virtually choke them up, So what we did was that our specifications, initially we had done the same thing that every other person did. We had specifications written out, and we had a meeting with them, and they said, no, madam, this specifications, if you bring it, we are not going to wear it. So we showed them pictures. They actually had a lot of information on what they wanted. So we had to alterate the gloves and make it shorter to ensure that they work. And they didn't want the latex ones. They actually wanted the cloth ones. So those were some of the things we did. It actually delayed our procurement, but in the end, they are using it. Yes. So I think that our provision of needs or services should factor in the consumer or the end product or the end user. So in this case, the informal. If they rather give you the specifications, they give you the ones that they want. And those ones, when you give them out, they use it.
Wonderful. Gia, is that same position?
Yes, I think we used a route that was a little different. So there's this type of learning that we try to put out there when we come into contact with informal workers. It's called participatory learning. So it's not, we try to use that so that we don't create a notion where it seems like we have the answers to their problems.
Yeah.
So we are bringing the answers to you. No. We sat with them like a round table, identified together with them what the challenges are, and together with them found solutions. And it would beat you to realize how much knowledge they possess by themselves. And so you go there with an understanding of what you think the solution is. You start interacting with them, listening to them, and you realize that what you probably thought is the solution is nowhere actually close to what solves the problems they have. And once we used that approach, it wasn't us providing solutions, but it was us with them together finding the solutions that works for them, knowing that the solutions are not for us, but for them. So once they agree that it works for them, it becomes a lot easier for them to adopt it. And that's what we did.
In effect, I mean, there's so much emphasis on the informal sector that, I mean, the numbers you gave us earlier, quite astounding, almost overtaking the formal sector and their impact on the economy, if I must say. What can be done for an interesting marriage, productive marriage to be formed between the formal and informal sector? If you look at the two organizations you work with, because they can't work in isolation.
No.
So I'm thinking of what kind of marriage can be formed. How would an interesting, productive marriage between the formal and informal sector look like in terms of the environmental sanitation space?
Yes, so I think something very interesting is happening, for instance, in Kole Klote. And okay. Kole Klote, there's a formal service provider, and there are some communities that he has categorized as low income.
Okay.
And collecting the charges from there, it's very difficult for him. So the firm has roped in the informal players.
Okay.
And they do the collection for those specific zones on the company's behalf. And he has arranged, together with the municipal environmental health office, they have arranged the fees to also help the informal players. And the informal players collect the waste on behalf of the formal service provider. So that's one example.
Okay.
The other example happening in Gan East and Accra Metropolitan Assembly is that they are organizing the informal workers into cooperatives and assigning them specific areas to work within, so that there's some kind of harmony in the operations. And it's not seen as, this is my territory, and you are invading and you are taking away my customers.
But at the district level, the formal players have their zones.
Exactly.
Their allocated zones.
Exactly.
Are you saying by this approach that the zones, allocated zones are taken away from the formal sector and shared over to the informal sector players?
Not entirely. So what we initially did under the Ministry of Sanitation, actually GARID, the component 2 is done by Ministry of Sanitation, was to look at the franchise agreements that the Assembly signed with the formal service provider and amend this agreement to allow informal workers the space to limited and specified areas. So their limitation or their specification is restricted to low and some pockets of middle-income communities. And so there's that space that has been allowed for them to operate in specific and specified areas. So in effect, they are not really taking over the formal service providers. They are only going into the places where if a big compactor truck cannot have access to go into, and places where they don't want to pay 40 cedis at the end of the month to a formal company. They want to rather pay 3 cedis every day in bits. So we are in a process of ensuring that their activities are defined in those specific pockets. So we call them the pockets. So it's happening very well in Ghana East and then also the Accra Metropolitan Assembly. And under the project, we are seeking to upscale it to the remaining 15 assemblies within GARID.
We are going to take a break. When we get back, we will return to the subject of the marriage between the formal and informal sector, environmental sanitation, and players. Stay tuned. You're welcome to the discussions today. Today we are talking about the informal sector and all the things, the institutions that are behind the informal sector thriving in Ghana in terms of technical and financial support. Before we went for the break, we were talking about how the formal and informal sectors in the environmental sanitation space, how they can work together. And Henrietta was telling us how under the GARID project, some assemblies are doing some amazing things where franchise spaces are somewhat allocated also to informal sector players so that they find themselves not encroaching necessarily, but also trying to help out with cleaning our communities. We have on the Zoom with us Mr. Karim Saagbul, who is from WIEGO. Hello, Karim.
Hello.
Hello, Karim.
Thank you. Yes.
You're welcome to Trash Talk.
Thank you, Madam, and I'm very happy to join the discussion and to also contribute to the discussion.
Thank you very much. We've been talking about the support that the different institutions, GARID and also GIZ, have been offering to the informal sector. And we want to know what WIEGO has also been doing to support the informal sector in the environmental sanitation space.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and I'm also delighted to be part of this very important discussion. As you would have seen already, WIEGO stands for Women in Informal Employment, Globalizing Organizing. And it's a research and advocacy group that is into supporting the informal sector workers. And in Accra, waste sector is one of the key areas that we support. And for the past 4 years, we've been supporting waste pickers on the landfill sites in organizing them and providing training and occupational health and safety on their livelihood options, opportunities, alternative life opportunities. And also more importantly, on policy space, engaging policymakers at different levels, at the local level, at the district assemblies, and even at the national level, on the administrative or even at the policy and development processes. We have been very active in supporting and representing the interests of the informal sector, in this case, the waste pickers. And through this collaboration, we're able to bring through research and well-informed statistics, we're able to contribute to the discussion around the contribution of the informal sector to the management of our waste systems. Thank you.
What are some of the challenges the women under the WIEGO project, what are some of the challenges that you've identified that the women face?
Yes, women in particular have some challenges when it comes to waste picking in Ghana. What we have is very poor working conditions or facilities available. For example, it's usually difficult to have what's it called, bathrooms around the landfill sites. So most of them have to keep what is supposed to come out of their bodies for a very long time, and that gives them more some health complications that we notice. Because as part of our work, we did conduct some health screening, and most of the diseases or findings that we have observed are actually as a result of lack of washroom and even water for washing. Beyond that, when it comes to the work, they are not able to compete with people who are able. For example, they have very weak bargaining power, and when it comes to prices and market systems, they are not doing they are not doing well at those places. So, voice and representation, marketing challenges, and also appropriate working conditions are not usually available in the landfill sites, and also for women in particular.
So do you offer training to them in these identified
Yes,
areas?
we do. Yes, not all of the trainings that we identified, not all the training needs that we've identified that to do, and that is why our core mandate is to find out and dig out through this through research, and also bring it to the attention of the policymakers, like the ministry and the projects like GARID project, to pay attention to some particular observations that we are making and to address them. So, but some of the trainings that we provide relates mostly to like occupational health and safety, just to keep everybody safe, training on negotiation, and also to engage those different levels of power at the landfill site. So, of course, we provide training, but not everything. It's not exclusive of everything that we need. So, we also need support and bring it to that, and do bring this to the attention of policymakers and those projects like GRZ and others who are also interested in helping the informal sector, mainly because of the contribution they are making to with the waste management systems.
Okay, thank you. What I'm going to ask next still has to do with their welfare. Which of you, I mean your institutions, is offering health insurance to the informal sector players?
So as part of our project, which is the Plastic for Jobs project, we engaged over 600 of them. And we found out that about 250, a little over that, had already insured, like signed on to the National Health Insurance Scheme. And so we promoted the National Health Insurance Scheme to the other people who were not insured, and made sure that they signed on to it as well during the course of the project. So the initial cost has been taken care of. And the anticipation is that through the empowerment we have given them, they would be able to, from there on, be in a position to renew the health insurance as and when the need arises, so that they are constantly on some health benefits in that regard. Yeah.
That's very good. I want you to share with me. That's WIEGO, GIZ, and of course the GARID. What have been some of your success stories? Henrietta will start.
One of the success stories when Karim was talking was that through all these coordination and partnerships under the Ghana Plastic Action Partnership, or the GPAP, we, with the support of WIEGO and other research organizations, have a framework of action for the informal workers, and it's actually gaining a lot of traction with other organizations as well. One of the interesting things I could just recall when Karim was talking about was, as part of the framework, what we realized was that women were about 70% of the informal collectors and pickers. But of these women, most of them are at the bottom of the bottom.
Yeah.
So even in the informal
What do you mean by
space,
bottom of the bottom?
so even in the informal space, there are hierarchies, and so all they do is just collect and sell it out to intermediaries. They don't add value to the products they collect, and like Karim said, they have very, very little bargaining power. They don't have recycling companies. They don't even think about all the other good things that you can turn waste into. And for them, it's just food and bread for the day. So if the value is 10 cedis and you give her 5 cedis, she's
takes
just
it.
looking at her son or her daughter who needs food, and she's going to take it.
But perhaps that's essentially all that they need. I mean, sometimes you're working to fulfill a particular need in your life, right? We have to conclude our program, but I want you, GIZ, to share with me
So
a closing remarks, if you don't mind. It can be in the form of the.
I'll share a story with you. So where I stay, my home is serviced by an informal waste collector.
Okay.
And it's not the same person every time. Then out of the blue, one guy comes, picks the trash from my home, empties it into his truck, asks for water, washes my bin, and places it back.
Wow.
Blew my mind.
Wow.
Came the second time, did it again. Third time, did it again. And it's a constant now. I don't even want to give anyone else the chance to do that.
Pick the waste.
And I tried to find out why his service was different.
And the costing?
I'm paying a little more than I would usually pay, but it really doesn't.
But you're happy paying.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
And I found this out. He was a beneficiary of my project.
Wow.
Yes.
You know, so it's good to do good after all.
Exactly.
You see, it comes back to you one way or the
Exactly.
other. We'll go to Karim. Karim WIEGO, would you give us your closing statements?
Yes, I would want to close by maybe going back a step back to discuss the health insurance bit.
Okay, just briefly
like
though.
David mentioned. Yes, briefly, yes. So we've also supported, with the support of GPAP, like Henrietta mentioned, done some work around registration of informal workers into the National Health Insurance Scheme. So there's still some work to be done there. And also briefly on what we have done, I think that it is important we bring the informal workers or their concerns to the table. And now we are beginning to see more and more of that. So in the NPAP processes, we have the informal sector and inclusive task force, where everybody, including the GARID project, the government, the NGOs, sitting there and discussing what they can do for them. That has never happened for a very long time. And I think that is one of the things that we can say that we are very instrumental in pushing the agenda. And because WIEGO is the chair of that inclusive task force, and we are doing a lot of work around that area. And I also conclude by saying that whatever we are discussing for the informal sector, we should always remember that there's nothing for them without them. So we should always bring them and also try to give them the space. We can only give a story of what the project is doing to support them, but it is important they also tell their own story. It might be different from what we are saying, and you don't know who is listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, representatives from GIZ, GARID Project, and of course, WIEGO. Henrietta, Ablorh, and then Karim. It's been a wonderful time with you. We've learned a lot about your projects, and the success story has been very encouraging. Yeah. We want to end today's program by saying that this program is focused on environmental sanitation and everything that's around it. And we are going to keep the discussions flowing. The next episode promises to be enlightening as we focus on an aspect of the environmental sanitation space. Do stay tuned to Trash Talk next Thursday.